This is the Auto Community Podcast. Hey there, everybody. This is Erin. I've got Mallory here today. My friend Mallory McClelland and I met, how long ago do you think it was? 6 years ago? 7, maybe?
Yeah, probably 6 or 7 years ago for sure.
Mallory and I were in some of the same circles talking about special needs children, talking about autoimmune disease. And then we wound up in the same courses together, studying about homeopathy. So, it's been a pleasure getting to know Mallory over the years. Mallory is an intuitive healer. She's also a family constellations practitioner. And we can get into a little bit about what that is exactly and how she is able to help families with special needs, able to help moms who are in need of deep healing after what I would say is very much a traumatic experience dealing with their children with special needs. And many of these moms have had great difficulty in healing themselves physically as well. So without further ado, here is Mallory. Mallory, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about what family constellations work is and how we focus on healing moms and kiddos.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this because you're amazing. And it's so fun that you're doing this and you're going to be putting all these amazing interviews out into the world. But yeah, so my name is Mallory. I live in the Chicago suburbs. I'm married and I have 5 kids, 3 stepchildren and 2 biological children with my husband. And my son, Christian, has a diagnosis of autism. And that diagnosis and his journey with vaccine injury is really what led me into the healing arts. Before that, I would say I was kind of just focused on the wrong things. Like my focus was career, making money, image, just, the things that I feel like as Americans we're really brainwashed to believe are the most important things, and they're just not. And when my son had his regression and his vaccine injury and all the developmental delays that came with that, I found a new focus and a new passion in my life. And it was to help him heal and to also understand why this was happening, why I had a perfectly healthy kid, why I had a child that was developing typically, even ahead in some areas, and all of a sudden things stopped. And, that led me down a path that at the time I was very much in warrior mom mode, but I was also traumatized. And I was really setting my grief to the side to put on, I wouldn't say I was putting on a brave face. I was putting on a focused hat in which I was like, I am going to focus. I am going to research. I'm going to figure out what happened. I'm going to figure out what went wrong. And I'm going to figure out how to reverse this, how to fix it. And it led me to the Thinking Moms Revolution blog. That led me to reading the book. And in the book, Zoe O'Toole wrote a chapter. She's the professor.
Right.
And her chapter was about her son's apraxia. And at the time, that was my son's diagnosis, was developmental delays and apraxia. And she spoke about working with Pierre Fontaine, who at the time was a very, very well-known popular homeopath, especially within the autism community. And I was like, okay, that's it. Like if that's what her son had, I was trying to create a formula. If her son had that, and then they did homeopathy with this person, and then her son gets better, that has to be what we need to do. Well, I call up Pierre's office and he's got like a 6-month wait list and his first appointment is over $900. And I'm like, no. I just it wasn't feasible at the time. Like I didn't have the money for it and I didn't want to wait. So there were 2 major factors. So I actually reached out to Zoe and she was kind enough to answer me, which I was shocked by because I'm like, oh my God, you're in a book and you have time for me? What? And she said, well, Angelica Lemke works under Pierre and she's great. and a lot of us are using her. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I can get in with Angelica within, I think it was like 2 to 3 weeks. Her price was still expensive, but it wasn't as expensive. And I was like, okay, I can do this. Like, it's doable. So that's a huge connection that Erin and I have, is that using Angelica, and then we wound up studying under Angelica. We were in, what was it, like a 3-year program.
Yeah, at least. I mean, I think from the beginning, when I started working with Angelica, personally too, that was a little bit before she started her courses. And then, so I do think there's a lot of moms that have kind of found each other through using the same practitioners, and eventually connecting via a lot of these online groups, which I am very thankful for. I'm not a big fan of any of the social media outlets, except for the fact that they've been able to bring us together in a way that, the community locally isn't necessarily always that supportive. You might not be able to find many parents that resonate with some of the treatments that you're utilizing, especially when you choose to go a different route. So I'm very thankful for all of those connections, for sure. Can you just tell me a little bit about, I know vaccine injury is a huge hot topic, especially right now, but at the same time, there's a certain, very much a grieving process, but also this feeling of violation, I think, in so many moms, that I think ultimately needs to be addressed. We have to think about how we allowed this to get to this point, not just as mothers, but, the fact that our doctors have been so indoctrinated into a system that is in fact causing harm. It's documented. There are millions of dollars of payouts within the system. So we know that it exists, but there's still this huge stigma behind that. And so sometimes I think mothers are afraid to, number one, speak out. They're also afraid to make it very clear to the people who perpetrated some of these things on their children that we're not going to take it anymore. And so I know that that's not you. I know that you've kind of overcome that, but what did it take for you to get to that place?
I think what it was is, like, I would say generally, I internalize a lot. And I'm not saying that's good or that's bad. I think it's just, that's a truth. It's a true statement about who I am as a person and how I don't know, I guess the way I'm made up. And for me, it was very easy for me, I guess, to let go of anger when it came to outside forces, because I was more upset with myself. I was angry at myself because I did have an intuitive hunch that the vaccines, I just had a very, very, very bad feeling about it. When I told my dad I was pregnant, I was terrified to tell him. I was 23. I was still in college. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, he's going to be so disappointed in me. And I thought, like, after I break the news, oh, my God, what's he going to say to me? And the first thing he says to me is, don't inoculate that child. I mean, if that wasn't a sign from God, the universe, the moon, the stars, or whatever you believe in, I don't know what was, And I had multiple instances like that through the course of the pregnancy, where just something in me was really questioning the vaccines, where I didn't know anyone with autism. I didn't know anyone that questioned vaccines. I didn't know anyone that lived a holistic lifestyle. I didn't have any connection to that whatsoever. And yet I had this memory as a 23-year-old, very self-absorbed girl, of somebody saying vaccines cause autism in their child. I don't even know where I heard that from, but it stuck in my heart, like something stuck there. And I brought it up to my husband. And so my husband was previously married, and he has 3 kids from his previous marriage. And he was like, you're not a doctor and you don't know what you're talking about. And I have 3 kids. They're all fully vaccinated. They're up to date and nothing's wrong with them. Like, I don't know where you're getting this stuff. That was one incident. And then a week before I give birth, I buy the Dr. Oz baby book, and I just happen to open the book, and the first page it opens to, do vaccines cause autism? And of course, the information in that book is whitewashed. It's not accurate. It's a regurgitation of everything that we hear. It's impossible. Like, that doesn't happen, blah, 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 blah. But something in me kept saying, like, no, 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 no. And I think for me, I was just so upset with myself that I didn't trust my gut. I didn't trust my intuition. I didn't even know what a gut feeling or what intuition was at that time. So in the process, at first I was upset with myself. Like, how could I give my power away? How could I listen to other people? How could I not fight harder? How could I succumb to this pressure? And then at the same time, it gave me my greatest gift, which is what I do now, which is being an intuitive healer. But what's even more special than that is in the journey, I have taught other mothers how to use their intuition, how to utilize their intuition, how to do energy work on their kids. So when you look at it from this perspective of like a full circle moment, I went from giving my power away, not even knowing I had intuition, not knowing I was intuitive, not knowing that's what I was hearing in my head, that's what those icky feelings were in my body, to then fully flipping that on its head and becoming so confident, so skilled, so precise with my own intuition that then I get the call from the kids and from the universe simultaneously to teach moms how to hear their intuition as well. How to let go of the guilt, how to let go of the shame, how to start overcoming some of that grief, how to stop blaming and to start seeing things from a different perspective. So it's this interesting dichotomy because on one hand, I am so fired up about what's going on in the world with the medical freedom movement, with our bodily autonomy rights trying to be taken away from us, trying to be stripped from us. And yet at the same time, if I didn't have that experience, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now.
Right.
So that's a weird place to balance it all, you know?
Yeah, most definitely. I think, it gets to the point where, you're exposed to something that is hugely traumatizing, right? I've spoken about in my case, it was a son who actually was never vaccinated. I did listen to my intuition. So I felt like I had done everything by the book. I had done everything right since the beginning. And yet I still wind up with a child with massive autoimmune disease. And so to me, I didn't have that kind of self-doubt, and, I couldn't blame myself, but then who could I blame? So there was kind of this feeling like, okay, well, if I can't blame myself, if I can't blame anybody else, then what is it? And really tapping into how do you heal from something that you don't even know where the assault came from? Like so many of us, when you think about healing, you're thinking about, getting rid of a pathogen or, blaming somebody else exterior, or blaming maybe a part of your body that, doesn't function properly, those kinds of things. But you're looking for externals. And unfortunately, or fortunately maybe, but I didn't really have that, but at the same time, there are so many moms out there that I do think are very much in self-blaming mode. They get to the point where they freeze. They start to listen to recommendations from doctors that perhaps they intuitively really disagree with. But at the same time, they're fearful. They don't trust themselves. They don't trust themselves to make another good decision. And so they allow other people to come in and perhaps even, further damage either themselves or their children. So, but I also know that there's a lot of this idea of ancestral trauma that comes in. And so many of us, I think, have been through these experiences because it's important for us to recognize that we are on the path of a certain destiny. And so as we go through these experiences, as traumatic as they are, perhaps they are put in these places in certain people to light that fire and to bring them to a place of following through with what they are destined to do. So let's just kind of talk a little bit about how you work with family constellations and ancestral trauma and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, before I get into the details of that, there's something really interesting that you brought up, and it's about that self-trust, and something that I have learned in my experience with working with the kids, because I do a lot of telepathic communication and channeling. And I'll never forget Lisa Joyce Goes, who's a huge name in our community, her son Noah. One day I was like texting a friend, and every time I was texting, the phone would autocorrect certain words to Noah. Like, I had never seen this before. And I'm like, okay, this is a sign. So when I was like complete with my day, I got in a bed and I put on just like really soft music, and I tuned in and I opened my heart, and I just said, Noah, if you have a message for me, just please share it with me. And I sat and I like just typed on my computer and I let the words drop in. And something he said to me that is going to stick with me for the rest of my life is that the moms think that autism, special needs, the illnesses, the vaccine injury is the thing that broke their heart. But the truth is, their hearts have been broken for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And I just went, whoa. And I started thinking about myself and my journey and clients I've worked with and just friends that I've gotten to know through the years. And it was true for every single one of us. And I'm not saying that for everyone who's listening, that's your truth. But in my experience and the people that came to my mind, it was 1,000% true.
Sure.
And our children's injuries, their illnesses, became the wound that was impossible to ignore, impossible to numb, impossible to escape from. And so as mothers, when we began facing that wound and the grief that came with that, under it was a shit pile of all the other heartbreak, all the other rejection, all the other abandonment, all the other pain that existed, that it was just easy enough to get through that we were able to numb it, whether it was with shopping or clothing or food or, success, money, whatever the case may be. But this very, very hard fate, this hard path that we watch our kids go through became a catalyst, and it became the thing that made us face the heartbreak, made us face the grief. And that ties into the family constellation work.
Right.
Because family constellation work is about healing transgenerational traumas. And that's the thing. We know about the toxic load. We've all seen the graphic of the bucket, and in the bucket, pesticides, and then the water rises a little bit. GMOs, vaccines, mold, right? And eventually the toxic load gets so much that what happens? It just overflows. And we use that graphic all the time. We use that analogy all the time when we talk about ourselves with our own health issues, or we talk about the kids. But it's the same thing with trauma. Like, we come in with these generational traumas that we're not even aware of. A lot of it we don't know of. Sure. We don't know about the first time our father got his heart broken. Those are things that we don't have access to that information. And another thing is like, we're living in a time right now where it's not only acceptable, but it's almost like the cool thing to do to openly discuss your trauma and how you're overcoming it and what you went through. And our parents and our parents' parents and before them, you didn't do that. You shut your mouth, you put on your work boots, and you did what you needed to do. You never stopped to process your shit. And what happens when you don't process it? It has to go somewhere. And it goes to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation.
Sure.
And so for me, the ancestral healing, whether it comes in through energy work or it comes in through family constellation work, it's vital. It's not something that we can ignore at all. Erin, think about it. Like, when you think about your own life, and you think about even before you had kids, right? Before you had your son, you can probably name at least 5 things that were traumas in your own life that didn't get resolved.
Right.
Right.
I think even, our parents' generation was very much, and especially our grandparents' generation, very much about this whole idea of kind of keeping the status quo, if you will, like not discussing things that were uncomfortable. And I do think that we've gotten to a place perhaps in human evolution where it's no longer an option to ignore the uncomfortable. And if you do, you're simply numbing out and escaping from something that will eventually find you again.
Yeah.
And I do think that, this is a place now, this is a very crucial time in our own human evolution where it's time to sink or swim. And there are people who will unfortunately sink along with this, but I'm hoping that by providing things like your service and this information out into the world, I can do even just a tiny little part and at helping people understand and recognize that it's time to do the uncomfortable thing.
As you were talking, I just kept having this vision of when we share our stories, what we're actually doing is we're extending the lifesaver. Like we're saying, like, I know you're drowning and I know that you feel that it's impossible to overcome what you're going through, but really you don't have access to the tools that are available to you because unfortunately the tools that Erin and I are very familiar with, and I'm sure all your listeners are familiar with, tools that work are deemed quackery and they get no type of media coverage whatsoever unless it's to abuse and to ridicule those tools. And people don't know that there is an entire world that exists of alternative healing, whether we talk about supplements or herbs or homeopathy, shamans, family constellation work, whatever the case may be. But there are things that exist that can help you shift and move and crack open from where you are so that you're not stuck anymore. And I think that we need to have more conversations like this. And you're providing such an incredible service because essentially what you're doing is you're saying, I know you're drowning, but here's the life raft. Here you go. Grab onto it. Like, come along for the ride with us.
Yeah, I just heard an interview the other day with a man by the name of Matthias Desmet. And it was really interesting because he said that as a society, we have really gotten to this place where we value only the rational mind. And to me, that was so profound because it's so true. This fracture in our society has to do with this idea of people who are embracing only the rational mind, only what they can see, touch, hear, and feel, only listening to the experts, only doing the things that they feel are in line with some kind of self-righteous behavior, or if you will, but completely ignoring the fact that, our entire DNA, for example, is filled with mysticism and spirituality, and we don't even know how 90% of the world functions. And so for us to be so arrogant as to only go through this life thinking that everything has to be linear and rational is to ignore our human side and what makes us human. And so I do think that there's so much more that could be said about that. But ultimately, when we're dealing with things like energetic work and family constellation and dealing with ancestral trauma that you don't know what it is, it's just there. You have this feeling of angst inside of you and you don't know where it's come from. Those kinds of things that need to be healed and need to be addressed. I do think that as this fracture of society continues, people are going to have to choose. And so, I hope to provide an avenue to allow them the opportunity to at least make that choice. And it's up to them, what they want to do at that point. But understanding that there really is so much more to being human than what so many of us recognize on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. I mean, we talk about informed consent, right? Which basically means I know everything that there is to know about this procedure, and I'm agreeing to that. Okay. We don't have informed consent, but this is kind of the same coin. You don't have information on what's available to you. You know, I worked with a mom and we did a constellation, and she basically said, like, I just feel like there's something wrong with my son. Like, his spirit, his soul seems broken. Like, something doesn't feel right. Nothing is sticking. Like, I don't understand what else I need to do. She's in a state of PTSD. She's trying to get her son better. She's throwing spaghetti at the wall. She's just trying to, like, how do I help this kid? How do I help this kid? They see relief, you know, for what? A day or two, and then nothing. And that's a very, very, very painful way to live. It breaks your spirit. It breaks your heart. It makes it difficult to keep going, you know? And I think that's what happens is a lot of times people come to a breaking point, and that's when they find things like energy work and family constellation work. And with her in particular, when I tuned in, I said, you know, did you lose a parent when you were young? And she said, yes, I lost my dad when he was young. And so the connection had been, I couldn't save my dad, and now I can't save my son. And that's where all of the healing converged. That's where everything needed to come together. That's where we really had to focus the energy work, is that even though our children don't know the ancestors, we don't know our ancestors, at a soul level, we become so bonded with those ancestors, with things that are unprocessed, that we become entangled with it. And when we become entangled with it, what winds up happening is we either will live a similar fate, we take on similar characteristics, we are trying to heal something that's not ours, and we're doing it on behalf of our family's soul, right? And that's something that people don't know. So they try and try and try, and they don't know why. How come nothing's changing? How come, you know, I'm not getting better? You know, like, for instance, money. Money is like a huge issue that a lot of people have, that they buy all the money mindset books and they listen to money meditations, and they do their affirmations and they do the visualizations, and yet nothing changes. Well, if you had an ancestor that took advantage of a lot of people, then at the soul level, you're probably trying to compensate for that ancestor. And there's something in you that's like, no, I'm not allowed to have money. But it's not that you shouldn't have the money. It's that that ancestor didn't pay the price, and you're paying the price for them. And then we disentangle. And so it can happen in any form, whether it's health or money or business or, you know, whatever the case may be. And so I think that's why we have to go into it, again, like you said, more of with that mystical approach to healing. Like, it's not just taking the right herbs or taking the right supplements or, you know, doing XYZ. Like, there is a whole other world that exists out there that these kiddos that are coming in are very, very connected to. And so I guess my suggestion, my advice to anyone who's listening that feels stuck is to have an open heart and an open mind, to trust yourself and to allow yourself to explore other avenues of healing. Because sometimes things stop working on purpose because they have to lead us to the next path.
Yeah. And just kind of backtracking a little bit, but, you know, a lot of people don't realize that we are in fact biologically tied. We carry genetic code from at least 3 to 5 generations back. And so, you know, we carry even genetic memories they've found within the body. So, you know, there's so much more that, again, that we just don't know, that we can't explain by any sort of rational thinking or, you know, scientific discovery. This is something that unspoken factors that make us who we are. You know, there's nothing out there, for example, that would explain when you walk into a room, let's say, of complete strangers, and you are feeling very drawn to one particular person. Why is that? There's nothing that says why that happens. And I'm talking about that like very energetic, magnetic type connection that has nothing to do with anything sexual or anything like that. I'm just speaking about, you feel drawn and called to certain people within the room, and there's a reason for that. And some of that might be, perhaps they resemble somebody in your ancestry, or, who maybe it was your great grandfather had the love of his life. And this particular woman across the room looks like that, woman. There are so many things that as you go through life might seem like coincidences, might seem like things that you can't explain. And when I hear stories like that, it's just, to me, it's confirmation that I don't know what I don't know. I'm not arrogant enough to believe that I know everything ever. And at this point, I feel like I'm a constant student of life. But I do think that when it comes to autoimmune disease, when it comes to special needs parenting, especially as moms, we get into this mode of very, very difficult caregiver burnout. And it can be very difficult to come back out of that, even with all the healing in the world.
Yeah.
And so there is a certain amount of energetic healing, of letting go of grief, of letting go of anything that has come up as far as ancestral trauma. If you're carrying around this idea that I am not skilled enough to save somebody like my own child, that's something that as a parent, dealing with a child who, might need care for the rest of their lives, that's a difficult realization to come to for anybody. Mm-hmm. But especially if you get to this point where there's all kinds of ancestral trauma coming in, things from the past that don't seem to let go. So I guess what I'm saying is, how would you deal with somebody who maybe isn't necessarily open to dealing with some of that gunk, if you will, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I can't give like a formula for it because it's different. It changes. But one thing that I rely on, like as a human being and in my work, is really being connected to my heart. And then when I'm connected to my heart, connecting to their hearts and allowing that space of connection to show where the soul is going to direct us, and then following that direction instead of trying to push an agenda of like, oh, well, your parents or your grandparents were Holocaust survivors, so of course that's where we need to go. The client, the person on the other end of the session, they have to have a readiness to be able to do the work. Otherwise, it's not going to stick and it's not going to integrate. And it's no different than with children. If you detox too quickly and you don't have enough supports in place, the child crashes. And it's the same thing with the parent. It's the same exact idea. So it's really about being in a state of grace and allowing something bigger to be the guidance in that session and to allow it to come through. And sometimes our job is to just plant the seed, to just mention something. It's not always to go in and do that deep excavating work, because the reality is, Erin, and I know that you know this very well, being in our community, you have to have a certain level of support, period. And that's what's missing in a lot of cases. There's an absence of support. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I would like to say is that don't beat yourself up if you haven't done this work yet, number one. Number two, if you don't feel ready for the work, don't beat yourself up for that either. When the time is right, you'll know. It's like that saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. It's the same idea. And, do as much as you can. But if you're a person that's listening, you feel like I am carrying a load, you can always just imagine like saying to your ancestors, everyone that came before you, thank you for life. Because the truth is, we wouldn't be here without them. We wouldn't have our life without them, right? And so you can say, thank you for life. Thank you for passing life to me. And imagining also that you can pick up a burden that's not yours and you can pass it back. And when you pass it back, it's not that you're leaving that person with a burden, but you're saying, I trust in you and I trust in the dignity of your soul that you can handle it. I'm not arrogant enough to believe that it's my job to fix everything that ever went wrong in this family.
Right.
And that does free you up in a way because you let go of some of this like past stuff and you're able to kind of be in the here and now to focus on your healing and then to focus on what your child needs, whatever that may be.
It's so interesting because I think so many of us, we go through traumatic experiences and we've been taught to push those aside or to overcome or get through it, but we don't actually address it. So years ago in my former life, I was teaching or coaching weight loss clients. So I was dealing with a lot of women primarily. I had a client who came to me specifically for weight loss, and we did a visualization. And something totally unexpected came up for both of us, actually. And she told me about how she had miscarried twins and how heavy that was for her. And that it was something that she had never dealt with. And so I said, well, I feel like, this extra weight that you're carrying on, you're holding on to those babies and trying to keep them safe and secure. And it's okay. They weren't ready to be born, and it's okay to let them move on, to let them go. And just something very simple like that, getting to the root cause of so many of our, physical ailments or our challenges is super important, but also recognizing that, she was carrying around extra weight because of this feeling and belief that she had been holding on to for years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do think so often most of our physical ailments can be very much timelined back to very specific instances where they were triggered. Maybe you have a story you could share with us, something about that.
I want to thank you for the story you just shared because it brought tears to my eyes. It was so beautiful because I think that's what happens is we walk around being very self-punishing and self-abusive and internalizing a lot of like, that woman maybe felt, oh my God, I'm fat because I'm lazy. I'm fat because of, I never make the right choice. I have no willpower. When in reality, you love your children so much and she couldn't let go of them. So the body said, okay, well, if you can't let go of it, I'll help you keep on this extra weight as a way to connect to them. And then when you look at it from that perspective, it's beautiful.
Right.
And the self-abuse and the punishment and the shame and the guilt, they no longer have a space to grow. And I think that is the beauty of doing the deeper work, is you get to actually see what is, you get to acknowledge the truth, and you get to let go of those stories and those beliefs, and you get to shed all of that to be present with what's really going on.
Yeah. So I know we're kind of rounding the corner towards the end of our time here, but I do want to just leave people with an actionable item. I always like to make sure that I give people something to hang on to. So if you could give anybody one tool, one piece of advice, something that they could do today, even if they're in that really, really dark space that I know you and I have both been in before, especially when we're in that massive caregiver burnout. So what would be the one thing that you would say that somebody could do today, the one step that they could take today?
I think the biggest step all of us can take is to forgive ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has to be step number one. It's really, really hard to heal when you are constantly punishing yourself. And think about it from the perspective of little kids. Little kids, when they're hit, they don't learn to change their behavior from the self-motivational place. They're afraid. And that's why they'll change the behavior. And I'm using air quotes right now. But really, those kids just get better at hiding their mistakes and hiding when they do something wrong. Right? And we have to apply that same love and logic and compassion to ourselves, especially as parents. We have all really tried our hardest, and we've all done the best that we could with the information that we had at the time. And the truth is, our society is not a society in which we have a village, and that leaves most of us feeling extremely unsupported. And when you're unsupported, you make decisions and you come from a place that really has its roots in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, what are you making decisions for? To survive, right? So I think if you can offer yourself the grace to forgive yourself for whatever that thing is that is weighing you down, whether it's you had an abortion when you were 19, or, you vaccinated your kids when you felt like they shouldn't get that, or you married an alcoholic, or whatever that thing is that you internally continue to abuse yourself over and over and over again. If you can forgive yourself for that, and you can look at yourself through a lens of loving eyes and a big heart and a lot of compassion, I think that can be step one in letting go of some of that weight and then moving into a different place, shifting your energy around healing yourself, healing your child, and coming to a place where you have more self-love and more compassion, not just for you, but for the world around you. Because at the end of the day, it's not a very peaceful place to live when you're constantly blaming yourself. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Understanding that we are the best that we can be in the moment. And even in the moments that we feel like we're not at our best, we're not acting at our best, it doesn't mean that we aren't making an effort to improve. And so I do think that, there's this idea that when we're on the path of continual improvement, that there are really no mistakes. There's just growth and understanding that we can learn from the things that we've done that we're maybe not so proud of. And the things that perhaps that we've done that we just made a decision based on everything that we knew at the time.
Right. I mean, even, bringing it back to what I was saying, how I internalized a lot of the vaccine injury stuff, and I was blaming myself because I didn't listen to my intuition. Well, my upbringing had trauma in it. And that trauma, the way that I adapted to that trauma was to become a people pleaser, was to follow rules. So when you follow rules and you're a people pleaser, that doesn't align with intuition. Like 90% of the time, the two things don't go together.
Right.
And so I can look back at myself and be like, you're such an idiot. Why didn't you listen to your gut? But instead I look back at myself and I go, girl, I totally see where you were. You were scared. You had a mom that had issues and you were trying to do the opposite of your mother, and doing the opposite of your mother meant what? It meant that I was going to follow every rule and do everything perfectly. Well, it bit me in the ass. Okay. Time to move on. Like, I love you anyway, because that's being human, is making mistakes, And I'm not trying to trivialize what happens with our kids. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that sometimes we have got to give ourselves the grace to just fucking let go, Because if we stay in this constant spiral of beating ourselves up, like we're not going to get anywhere. I always say this to like clients too. Like, think about when your child like started walking, right? What happened? They would grab the table, they would tumble. You didn't look at your kid and go, God, you suck. You're such an asshole. You should be running right now. No, you like grabbed your kid, you hugged them, you said, it's okay, baby. You held their hand until they were ready to like let go and do it on their own, right? And like, we have to have that same compassion and that same nurturing and mothering toward ourselves when we're on this healing journey.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
I love that. We should treat ourselves like newly walking toddlers always.
always. I think we'd all be a lot happier if we could, like, apply that to everything in our lives, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So,
Mallory, this has been such a joy. I love talking to you always. So for people who are looking for more information and would like to perhaps schedule a session with you, where can they find you?
You can find me at my website, www.mallorymcclelland.com. On there, you'll see a place to schedule. Click that, and then you'll see all the different options.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to doing this again if you'll come back.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you to the listeners. I mean, this is just, it's so fun. And if you're listening to Erin, I know that you're good people. So it's good to be in that space with you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Until next time, take care.